Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to chat about the last 10 historical fiction reads I read. Let's get into it. Alright, so I recently did one of these kind of like, is it worth the hype? Yes, no, maybe type of style videos for fantasy romances. And so I wanted to do this for just a bunch of other genres and tropes and just kind of all the things. So this one's going to be for historical fiction books, and I'm just going to quickly go through the last 10 historical fiction books I read and let you know if yes, you should pick them up, no, you should pass on those, or maybe you should pick them up and why. So basically like, were these worth the hype and should you read them as well? So historical fiction is a genre that I have always read and loved, and throughout the years it's kind of been more hit and miss, like if I pick them up or not, I should say. And so this last year in particular, it really helped me pick them up more than usual because I did end up starting a historical fiction book club with my sweet friend Tori from Novel Life. So Tori and I run Leave It to the Pros book club, which is a historical fiction book club where we just pick up historical fiction books and then we have a live show every month to talk about the books on YouTube here. So definitely join us if you're not. We have an Instagram below if you want to go and check out all of our picks and things like that. That's where we post our book club picks for each month, as well as the live show dates. It's very informal, like you can read the books as you want, and then we just have a live show at the end of the month to talk about it. So it's been a fun way to make historical fiction more of a priority in my reading, and it has helped me just like pick up more historical fictions every month in general, like whether they are for our book club or not, I pick up like the new releases and have kept up with them, so I'm loving it. All right, so I'm just going to pull up my Goodreads because if you're not following me on Goodreads, I do review every book that I read, and you can always get to it through the links in the description of this video. And on my Goodreads, I have like shelves as well. So I have a whole historical fiction shelf, and I'm just going to go through the last 10 that I have recently read and let you know all of my thoughts. So most of these I have talked about before, and some of these, like this one in particular, is one of my favorites of 2024, so you're going to probably have heard me talk about a lot of these a lot. So this is Take My Hand by Adolene Perkins Valdez. This is an absolutely yes. This is one of my favorite reads of 2024. Love this book to pieces. It's definitely a hard hitter, which I feel like is kind of common with historical fiction books in general. So this book takes place in post-segregation Alabama, so I want to say it's like 1973. Yes, Montgomery, Alabama, 1973, and we are following a Black nurse, and it is her first job. Like, it is her first job as a nurse, and she ends up getting work at a family planning clinic. And so we end up following her on her journey there, and kind of at first she's just kind of like taking on tasks and doing what is told of her to do. But then you see her quickly start to question things when two of her first patients are these two young girls, and they are, I want to say 11 and 13, and she's tasked with giving them birth control. And so she's like, wait a minute, like what's happening here? Like, why am I doing this? What's going on? Is there a bigger thing at play? And so it kind of goes from there. This is based on a true story in American history, and the nurse in here is based on a true woman who was a whistleblower on this giant case that ended up happening. So a lot of horrific things going on. There is institutional racism and classism and reproductive injustice and just all the things. This is a very hard hitter, but it hit so well, and the author's writing on top of that was just spectacularly stunning, amazing. Like a few chapters in, I could tell this author's writing was just so good. I wanted to pick up anything that she ever writes again. But it is a heavy hitter, just know that going in. The content in here though, I feel like everybody should know about. It's things that, you know, possibly are still happening in our country and our world today. So highly recommend checking this one out. I loved this book to pieces. Next up is The House on Biscayne Bay by Chanel Cleeton. This is an author that I absolutely love. So this is going to be a yes from me, possibly a maybe, depending on the type of historical fiction reader that you are. But for me, it's an absolute yes. I really love this one. I have read all of this author's historical fiction books. I have a whole author's guide to her books on my channel. So if you want to get to more of her books, I'll link that guide in the description of the video. And so not going to lie, the marketing for this one is honestly what grabbed my attention as well. The author used a lot of like Clue imagery, which the board game Clue, which is one of my favorite board games of all time. I love it to pieces. And so that immediately grabbed my attention. I love when a house is kind of the center of a story or a character itself as a part of the story. And so the house in this one is definitely a part of the story, and I loved it. So this one's just very lush and gothic. The writing in here, it was kind of compared to, or said that fans who have enjoyed Rebecca should pick it up, which is again one of my favorites, and so I loved it for that as well. So this one we get dual timeline. It is post World War I, and so a lot of like rich, wealthy families from upper East Coast are moving down to Florida in particular. And so the heroine in here, or one of the heroines we follow, her and her husband are moving down, and he is actually the one building this house on Biscayne Bay. And so it's this gorgeous gothic mansion. So they're kind of entering the Miami social life and all of those things. And at the opening, like the grand opening night for their new gorgeous house, there is a murder that happens. And so it kind of goes from there, and then you kick over to the 1940s timeline, and there is a new family or a new couple living in the house, and some things go down there, and there is another murder. And so some things happen with some murder mysteries happening in both timelines. I just really love that glitz and glamour and how both storylines kind of wove together really well. So yeah, really enjoyed this one, but but I think more so if you're a historical fiction with mystery fan, then this one's gonna work for you. All right, the next one I don't have a physical copy of, so I'm gonna put it up here. So this is All We Were Promised by Ashton Lattimore. And this one I'm gonna say maybe. Like I ended up giving this one, I think 3.5/4 stars. So I did enjoy it, but at times I was a little bit bored as well with the style of writing, which I believe this was the author's debut. So I'd probably check out more from them going forward into the future. And one thing I did really like about this book was the historical elements to it. So if you wanna go in and learn some things, highly recommend checking this one out. This is a book that takes place in Philadelphia, so the US in pre-Civil War. So it's like 1837. And so we get to follow these 3 different women and their stories through this kind of like pre-Civil War era in Philadelphia. So I really like the author's note in this one. I actually highlighted it as well because it perfectly summed up this book. So it says, this book and story are told to shine a light on the often overlooked agency and ingenuity of the Black women and men who helped shape Philadelphia and the abolitionist movement during the pre-Civil War period of American history. And so like I said, in this one, we're following 3 different women and they all have different backstories. One of the women, she was formerly enslaved with her father and they ended up going on the run and escaping. And so now they live in Philadelphia and they're kind of hiding out or pretending to be people that they aren't. And then another of the women, she is somebody who was born and raised in Philadelphia. She has only known the like kind of city life at the time. And she is more wealthy and just like in society. So she has a very different outlook to being a Black woman of the time, but she is very active in the Women's Anti-Slavery Society, which is kind of what a lot of this story is based around. So like I said, I really enjoyed the time period and the history that we got. And I thought the 3 women's stories was really interesting and liked seeing it kind of all pulled together. There were just times with the writing style, I felt like we're a little bit tedious and slow. So that's why it would be a maybe for me. And like I said, I do want to continue on and check out more from this author in the future because I believe this was their debut. So there's like room for improvement. So this one's going to be a maybe for me. All right. And then the next one is The Lies We Leave Behind by Noelle Salazar. So this one's going to be a yes for me. This one was actually our Leave It to the Pros book club, our pick for November. It was a new release just this past year. And we both really enjoyed this one. This was actually my second time reading from this author. And this is my favorite from them yet. I really love this one and I kind of went in with some expectations from what is kind of on the cover of the book as well as the back. It talks about this heroine being somewhere in the Pacific and she is a flight nurse at the time during World War II. And so I had some expectations about this book and I will say the first half of the story was a little bit slow and I was a little bit like, where are we going with this? But the second half of the story really kicks it up a notch and kind of turns the whole story on its head, which I loved. I love to be surprised by books. And so I will say if the first half is a little bit slow for you, maybe just like try to stick along, grab the audiobook from your library and just kind of like go along for the ride because once that second half kicks in, the story is just so good. It had me like glued to the edge of my seat. I really enjoyed the kind of twists and turns that we take with the story. This book actually had me like tearing up towards the end with some things that happen, with some reveals. And so I was just super invested. I really enjoyed this one. And like I said, I want to check out more from this author. I think she has 2 other books out currently. So she's kind of a newer historical fiction author writer, as far as I know. And so those other 2 I want to get to soon as well. So yeah, The Lies We Leave Behind is going to be a yes for me. All right, next up is Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. If you've been following me at all for the last few months, you will know that this one is going to be an absolute yes for me. I love this book to pieces. This is one of my favorite books of 2024, and it is just everything and more. I cried multiple times reading this book, even cried multiple times after the fact when I was talking about this book to people. This book was just everything and more. This is a World War I story, and this is an epistolary story. So basically that means that the entire story is told through letters, through newspaper articles, through telegrams between the characters, and that's how the story is told, which I love an epistolary story, so I loved that aspect to the story. So I'll show just like a quick example. So we have letters in here between characters, we have telegrams, and like I said, there's newspaper articles some of the characters have written. I really enjoyed this one. So like I said, this is World War I, and it starts off in England, and we're following this kind of like main core 4-friend group. So we get the main heroine, or what I will call the main heroine, and then we get her brother's story. He has joined up in the war, and then her brother's best friend, he has also joined the war, and then the heroine, her friend, who becomes a nurse during the war. And so we kind of get all of their 4 different stories told, like I said, throughout letters, throughout telegrams to one another, and just all of those things. I really appreciated and liked in here how I don't read a lot of World War I books, and I really want to. I wanted to find more of those. So if you have any, definitely let me know in the comments. But what I loved about this one is just how like raw and real it felt as far as like these characters, or just people in general who joined World War I, they thought this was just going to be like a quick, easy thing. Like they didn't think it would take long. They thought they'd be home before the holidays, before Christmas. And of course, 4 years go by and they're still there and the war is still happening. There was a lot of kind of PTSD or early I guess PTSD, because it wasn't coined at the time, that term at least. And so we see a lot of those struggles in the story as well with some of the characters, and just, it's just so good. Like I said, it had me in all of my feels. There is a romantic element to the story as well. I love this one to pieces. An absolute yes from me. The audiobook in particular, if you don't want to like read the letters and telegrams, the audiobook is fantastic. It is a multicast narration, so we get different narrators for the different kind of points of view that we're getting in the story. Love this one to pieces. Absolutely a yes. Next up is The Paris Library by Janet Charles. This one would be a maybe, possibly a no from me. So this one I had, like, it was a 3-star for me. Like, it was fine. So I kind of went into it just knowing it would be fine. So I guess if you go in with that kind of like expectation, maybe you'll enjoy it. So that's why it's like a maybe, but probably a no. This one's World War II, and we are set in Paris. And what I did really appreciate about this one is we are following these librarians, and we are following a heroine in particular who becomes a librarian at the American Library in Paris during World War II. And so we see a lot of that kind of wartime, her relationships with people during that time. So we see the librarians trying to do everything they can to keep the library open when they're told to close. You see them trying to protect the books and just like send books to soldiers who are off at war. Just kind of all of those aspects of it. You can tell this is a book for people who love books. So I did really appreciate the kind of love for books in this one, and getting to see the librarian's story. I thought that part was so interesting for the story. This one though is told in dual timeline. So while we have that setting during World War II in Paris, then the other part we're in the 1980s in, I want to say Montana in the US. And so in here we're following this young girl, and her neighbor is the woman we were following who was a librarian in Paris. And so it's many years later, and this young girl really wants to become friends with this like older woman who's her neighbor and kind of hear all of her stories. And so that part of the story I was a little less into. So that's kind of part of what I didn't enjoy about the story, as well as like the pacing and just kind of like the scenes would just like abruptly stopped, and we kind of like would jump back in time quickly. So yeah, it'd be probably a no maybe from me. So that is The Paris Library. All right, and then the next one is Husbands and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. I don't know if this one is going to be like a hot take or something, because I feel like this book is everywhere. I saw it as like one of the top like book of the month books of last year. It was on the Goodreads Choice Awards, one of like, I think the final like top 10, things like that. I know this book and this author's, like her books are everywhere, and I see so many people picking them up, but this one was an absolute miss for me. This is going to be a no from me. So this is Husband and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. Like I said, this was actually our January Leave It to the Pros book club talk. So we have a whole live show on it, which I think is on my channel. You can check that out as well. I'll link it below. So we had a whole discussion about this book, and basically our issue with this book is the fact that it wasn't heavy on the historical fiction. Like, historical fiction, sure, it was a little bit like it took place in Egypt in, I think, 1950s, but that storyline just felt kind of just added there. It didn't really add anything to the overall story. So we had a whole discussion about like what makes historical fiction historical fiction. Like, does it have to be a certain percentage of the book that takes place in a historical time? Does it have to teach you anything? Does it have to leave you with anything like about that historical time period? And so anyways, check out our live show for sure. But this one was just a miss for me. It's more women's fiction, maybe like contemporary fiction. It is dual timeline, and we start off with 2022, and we're basically following this woman who is a single mom, and she's having struggles with her son's health at the time. She also has to tell her son's father that they have a kid together because he doesn't know, and it's kind of more about her relationships, as well as her trying to find out things about her mother, who she learned was adopted, and just kind of her past. And so it kind of goes from there, and I just felt like it was such a miss, and all of the characters were just so unlikable and just like, I don't know, uninteresting, that I just was judging them for a lot of their choices. And so I don't know. It just wasn't a good time. So I'm not really in a big rush now to check out more from this author, sadly, which before this I had wanted to check out more from her backlist. This was my first read from her. So maybe I will if some of the other ones have more of like a historical aspect to the story. So we shall see. But this one in particular, Husbands and Lovers, is going to be a no from me. All right, next up, I read The Lotus Shoes by Jan Yang. This one is a new release. It just came out in January of 2025. And this one I really enjoyed. So this one's going to be a maybe, but more on the yes side for me. So first of all, the cover for this one is stunning with the gold and the green, and this one takes place in the 1800s in China. And so in here we're following these two women, so we kind of see their entire lives and their complicated relationship. And one of the women, or she was a girl at the time, she was literally sold to the other girl's family, who was like more wealthy, more of like a society type of life type situation, where she was basically sold into this family basically to be a kind of maid or companion to this other girl. So you see them from when, I want to say they're like 6 or 8, and they have a lot of like jealousy and different kind of competitive feelings towards one another over the years. And you see their entire lives as they get older, and some things with marriage come up, and just kind of all the things for living in 1800s China, and the rivalry, sometimes the friendship, the betrayal, the losses, all the things that happen throughout their lives. I really enjoyed this one. There were some slower parts for me, but I feel like the kind of end half of it really brought it back all together. And I loved how sometimes things were bad, sometimes things were good, but these two women just had like such a bond in one another's lives and to one another. And like I said, sometimes it's complicated, sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, but just the story overall was just such a good one. So yeah, I did enjoy this one. So this is The Lotus Shoes by Jan Yang. All right, and then this next one is a novella. So this is a historical fiction novella from Kate Quinn, and this is Signal Moon. So this is actually available on Kindle Unlimited, and if you grab the Kindle Unlimited ebook, you get the audiobook with it. So it's part of the read and listen feature, which I absolutely love, highly recommend. So this one's a very short and sweet, so I'll kind of keep my thoughts short and sweet as well. But basically, I love this one, so this is going to be a yes from me. So in here, the heroine we're following, she is part of kind of society life, and so it is the beginning / during the height of World War II, and so she basically has to trade in her white gloves to kind of get a job and go into the workforce. So she ends up working, and she's hired to intercept naval communications and then pass on the messages to Bletchley Park for them to translate. And so that is her job. She traded in those white gloves, and now she has a set of headphones where she kind of intercepts these communications. And so one night she is working, and like I said, it is World War II, so it's the 1940s, and she ends up intercepting this call from a US naval officer who is requesting help. There's this like SOS, his ship's going down, and she's like, what's going on? Like, nobody else is reporting these issues. Like, I'm not getting any other messages from anybody else talking about this. And so lo and behold, she finds out that this man is actually from 2023. And so I'm not gonna say anything more because you kind of got to go along for the ride. I will say if you enjoy Frequency, the movie, you might enjoy this one as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It's just a very quick, short little novella, and I really especially loved the audiobook. So yeah, highly recommend. It's really short and sweet, but I love this one on KU. All right, and then the next one that I just actually finished, and this one actually doesn't come out until April, so you have some time to maybe pre-order, get some early audiobook holds in. This is The Book Club for Troublesome Women by Marie Bostwick. So this one comes out in April, and I had an audio ALC of it, so I got to listen to it early. So this one will be a yes for me. I really enjoyed this one. I kind of went in with no expectations. I had never read anything from this author before, but immediately I was just like easily pulled in to her writing style and her characters. This basically takes place in the 1960s in the US. It's like in the suburb of Virginia, and we're following these 4 different housewives who are dissatisfied with their lives for different reasons. And so they end up forming this book club because this new groundbreaking book for the time ended up coming out, which was The Feminine Mystique, which was basically like this very groundbreaking book, which a lot of women, like a whole generation of women, really connected to this book and got to see that their own dissatisfactions with life, they're wanting more, their longings and dreams, like they all just felt very heard with this book. And so that is kind of the basis for this friend group. Like they came in not really being friends, some of them were like strangers, and they formed this book club together. And then over time, of course, it's about the books, but it's also just about them connecting as women, and you get to see their struggles with life and their different situations they're in, and kind of like their whole world is just open up. They have all these new possibilities and dreams that they never like thought they dreamed of, like are happening. So the conversation about books in here is what I really appreciated. Like I said, all of the women's stories, I was really invested in their journeys as well, but I really like just this overall talk about books in this book. And so there was this note at the beginning that I highlighted from the author before you even get into the book, and it says how, I'll just like sum it up, but it's basically saying how books don't always change your life, but they can send you on a search for a better life, a better purpose. And so I really appreciated that as a book reader, obviously, and just the way that this book, which I think I like about historical fictions in general, is like they just make me think of just like things outside of my own life or my own perspective. And I really appreciate that with these stories and just the way that they make you think. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, this book just made me think and wonder about different women, like the fact about this book coming out and all of these women, like how it became such a thing for them during their time period, and just have a kind of different take or a better appreciation for women who have come before and just the things that they have gone through and the things that they experienced and the things they were feeling. Like, I feel like we're all in this together, you know what I mean? So anyways, I really enjoyed this one, mostly because of the way that it made me think and feel about the book. So yeah, highly recommend this one. It comes out, I think, April 22nd, I want to say. Definitely recommend checking it out. I really enjoyed it. And if you've read more from this author in the past, definitely let me know because I want to check out more from her now. All right, so those are the last 10 historical fiction books that I've read recently and all of my thoughts on them, if they're yes, no, or maybe. I will say most of these were going to be a yes from me just because I really enjoy historical fiction, and I feel like the ones I've been picking up lately have been so good. So definitely let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video. If you have read any of the books that I talked about, let me know. If you're going to pick up any of them, I would love to know that as well. And like I said, there are quite a few of those that I want to check out more from the authors. So definitely let me know if you have other book recs from any of those authors I mentioned as well. I will of course link all the books that I just talked about in the description of this video. I have also reviewed all of them on Goodreads. So if you want to see even more of my thoughts or my full reviews on any of those books, I do talk more in depth about all of them and review them on Goodreads. So definitely go check that out as well. I'm also going to link, I have a whole historical fiction playlist on my channel as well. So I'll link link that below for you too if you want to check out more historical fiction content. And if you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments today to let me know that you watched this video, leave me kind of the old-timey clock. I think there's like a mantle clock emoji. Leave me that, or any type of clock emoji, since we are kind of like going back into time with these books. So definitely do that. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!